All right, let's move on, boys. We're going to talk about the Four Nations, a big tournament. But before we get to the Four Nations, I've got a Fave 5 of my Four Nations / Tri-Nations, because it's sort of the same tournament over the last decade. So, Fave 5, Four Nations, Tri-Nations moments. My honourable mentions go out to New Zealand's unbeaten run through the 2014 Four Nations and Samoa's nearly win over New Zealand in that same series. Also, the 2010 New Zealand win I left off because I already included it in another Fave 5 when the Benji Marshall moments. So, let's move on to the Fave 5 moments. I'll start with the 2005 Tri-Nations final. New Zealand winning it 24-0 over Australia. This was the moment, really, for me, where the penny dropped and International Rugby League began to have some relevance again. You know, the international game still has a long way to go, in my opinion, but the road back started here. New Zealand came into the game as distinct underdogs. At the time, Australia had not lost an international series since 1978. That's 27 years since Australia had competed in an international tournament and not been victorious. They also hadn't dropped a series or tournament to New Zealand specifically since 1952. But the Kiwis, they did have a couple of things on their side. 6 weeks prior, they'd beaten Australia in Sydney for the first time in 46 years, and the Kangaroos lost their skipper Darren Lockyer and their halfback Andrew Johns before the final. It was the ultimate opportunity for an ambush, and the Kiwis took it with both hands. They crushed the Kangaroos, dominated all facets of the game, 24-0 winners, one of the finest displays in the history of New Zealand Rugby League, and the moment for me when the penny dropped and things started to turn in New Zealand's favour. They had a great decade since.
Yeah, it was the light bulb moment where not only did everyone in Australia kind of go up and go, oh, geez, the Kiwis really are a team, everyone in New Zealand kind of went,
hey,
oh,
we can beat
geez,
them.
this is a team we can actually beat.
Yes.
We can do this. We can beat them. And despite them not having some big stars and big names in that Australian side, you know, at that time, so it was a huge effort from the Kiwis, and that was kind of, I agree with you, Kiwi, that was the moment where the light bulb kind of came on.
Tiny bit of trivia from that game: the Australian team fielded just 3 Queenslanders, Brent Tate, Precious Sivanasiva, and Steve Price in the 17-man squad, and just one player from that game is still playing in the NRL right now, and that is Manu Vatuvei. He's the only one who's still left from that game in 2005.
He might not be playing for the next...
He may not, but at this stage he is. Number 4, Darren Lockyer's final stand in 2011, playing for Australia for the 59th and final time. Darren Lockyer led the Kangaroos in the 2011 Four Nations final against England, a side brimming with confidence at the time. The Poms had dispatched of the Kiwis en route to the finals and firmly believed that this was their time to end what for them was a nearly 40-year hoodoo against the Aussies in terms of winning in an international tournament. It was tight. Scores were level until nearly 3/4 of the way through the game, but as often happens, the Aussies pulled away in the last 20 minutes to win it 30-8. But the moment perhaps remembered above all else in this game was Lockie's final plays. Okay, in the last minute of the game, Lockyer jumps into dummy half, puts a grubber kick in, bounces off the post, back into his arms, and he scores a try next to the sticks. Would have been his last ever play as a professional footballer. Legendary ending to a legendary career.
And then
he went one too far when Jonathan Thurston handed him the kicking tee. Sitting next to the post, Lockyer spending a good chunk of his career as a first-choice goal kicker. It should have been regulation way to end a great career for him. One last highlight. Instead, Lockyer kicked more dirt than ball. He finished his career with one of the worst attempts at goal in history. It went nowhere. It was hilarious. It was embarrassing. But for Lockyer, unquestionably one of the most memorable moments the tournament has ever given us.
Just the worst way to sum up the career that Lockyer had was that awful, atrocious kick at the end.
He had the perfect ending, and he took it too far. He should have left it at that try. That
One
would have been
too
perfect.
many, Lockie.
Number 3 from this year's series, Scotland's historic moments. This result should have been a foregone conclusion, but you can level as much criticism as you like at the Kiwis for underperforming, but the emotional last-minute draw from the Scottish was as good as it gets, boys. The Minnows, they went toe-to-toe with then the world number 1 team. They'd been hammered by Australia and England in the first 2 games, but they turned it on against an NZ. A couple of late tries from New Zealand should have snuffed out the dream, but the Scottish Bravehearts refused to let history slip through their fingers. A 78th minute try to Ewan Aiken, a conversion from out wide from Danny Brough, levelled the scores and meant they recorded the draw that has had everybody talking ever since then. The feel-good moment of the tournament this year, unless you're a Kiwi supporter, Scotland, 18-all draw against New Zealand. What a moment.
Absolutely awesome. That second half from the Scottish was so good. They really took it to them. Yeah, you know, the skill of guys on that team, you know, they had Linnett and Aitken in the centres. Luke Douglas was one of their starting front rowers.
Coop.
You know, Coop was at the back. Not, some NRL experience, but not superstars by any means. So that was a huge moment for them. And you know, they should have lost. Kiwi scored in the 75th minute. They should have lost. Yeah. And yet the Scottish just would not go away, and they kept coming back. And then they kicked that goal at the end, and you see the look of the face of the guy that kicked it. I don't know his name, but Danny Brough, that's it. And he went and kicked it, and just absolute elation on his face. It was awesome.
Number 2, I'm sure everybody remembers this one. Kidwell versus Mason from 2006 Tri-Nations. One of the most vicious moments in recent international rugby league memory. The opening game of that 2006 Tri-Series saw Willie Mason laugh and jeer during the haka. Now, after the fact, he said he was laughing at Brent Webb, who was playing for New Zealand at the time. He's an Australian-born, playing for the Kiwis, for doing the haka as an Australian-born, as I say. But whether that excuse washes with you or not, it certainly wasn't something that translated at the time. And disrespecting the haka was a crime that was not going to go unpunished by the Kiwis. Tempers had already boiled over in the minutes prior. Matt King got pushed over and started swinging at Manu Vatuvai, and a big brawl broke out in the corner. But about a minute and a half later, things exploded. David Kidwell lined up Willie Mason with one of the most brutal shoulder charges you've ever seen, laying Mason out, taking him out of the whole game. The shot fired up everybody. The pictures of David Kidwell standing over him, beating his chest and over a fallen Mason, that's sort of legendary stuff in rugby league. So Australia would go on to win that game, but it will be remembered for that moment there with David Kidwell taking on Big Willie.
Yeah, the funny thing is no one remembers who won. No one cares.
They just remember the hit.
Just remember the hit and the 2 fractured eye sockets that Willie Mason got, and just the absolute embarrassment. But yeah, what a hit.
Yes. Number 1 from 2006 as well is Australia's win in extra time of the final in that game, capping probably my personal favourite year of rugby league ever. Was probably the best international game played of the last decade or so. It was fantastic. Australia and New Zealand duked it out in the 2006 Tri-Nations final at the SFS, going all the way to extra time for it. Nothing could separate them. A seesawing, high-quality game of football. Scores were level at 12 all at the end of 80 minutes. The Kiwis produced 2 brilliant tries, one coming from a Stacey Jones chip kick, while Australia nearly secured victory with seconds remaining. Willie Mason, as we were just talking about him before, he stormed through, kicked ahead for Thurston and Inglis, but a knock-on from GI prevented what should have been the game-winning try on the buzzer. However, the script was already written for another legend. In the 7th minute of extra time, Jonathan Thurston threw a big dummy, sliced through the defence, as we've seen him do so many times, got into the clear with only the fullback in front of him, and who emerges in support but Darren Lockyer. Draw and pass, Lockie scores under the post to win the Tri-Nations, completing a ridiculous year for Darren Lockyer. He captained Queensland to Origin victory, the Broncos to Premiership glory, and finally the Kangaroos to Tri-Nation success, and he produced the winning play in all 3 of those scenarios. The famous intercept in Origin, the final field goal in the grand final, and then the match-winning try in the Tri-Nations. An untouchable year from an incredible player, and my personal favourite moment in Tri-Nations, Four Nations history.
The most clutch year out of anyone from Darren Lockyer for that year. That was just all clutch. And then, yeah, to cap it off like that, what a win at the extra time. It was such an even game. I don't remember too much about specifics or whatever, but I just remember watching that game and it just being so even. You could not separate either of the teams. And then, yeah, what was it, 7 minutes in extra time until you finally had someone slice through and it kind of went. And that was it. That was all she wrote.
2006 always brings a tear to my eye. I wish 2016 has been a rubbish year in more ways than one. Sorry. Anyway.
Let's go back, reminisce. But yes, that is my Fave 5 Tri-Nations, Four Nations moment. There's some doubt about the tournament moving forward, or when they're going to play it, if they're going to play it moving forward. But I hope they do. Well, yeah, it's not confirmed. We don't know what they're going to do yet.